I'm Mark Noble, and this is the Academy of Football podcast with 𝗏𝗏𝗦𝗏 and Darren Blewett.
Yo, this is the Academy of Football in claret and blue. Absolutely massive, they just ain't got a clue. But just watch how we move, it's SD and CC. Put your hammers in the air for the team. World class pod, we got it here, come and see. Might see your favourite ex-player on the screen. Iron sharpens iron, Kevin Blewett on the scene. Yeah, stepping in clean. Irons.
April is Testicular Cancer Awareness Month. 1 in 250 men are affected by testicular cancer in their lifetime, between the ages of 20 and 34. I'm 𝗏𝗏𝗦𝗏𝗏, this is the Academy of Football podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my guest today, Tracy Tombides. Hi Tracy, how are you?
Okay, very well, thanks for having me.
No problem, thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
What we do at the start of our podcast is we take it right back to the very start. So where did you grow up and how did it all begin?
I grew up in Perth, in Western Australia. I'm the oldest of 4 girls, my first child that unfortunately didn't make it into this world passed away shortly after he was born, and the next one to come along was Dylan in 94, and then Taylor in 96. It doesn't seem like 30 odd years ago that I started that part of my journey, but yeah, that's what it is. And I suppose I mention Jordan, my firstborn, because I think his passing prepped me for Dylan's passing. And I remember at the time he passed away, I was reading this news article, and it was basically about a man that had just lost his wife to cancer. And he was grateful for everything he learnt during it because his daughter now was going through it, and he felt he was in a far better position, both mentally and physically, to help her. And I just thought, I wonder why this is resonating with me. And yeah, when Dylan got sick, it was like I just put the 2 and 2 together. And it wasn't that I'd had anyone else in my life that had cancer. I think it was, looking back, and obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, that there was life after Jordan's passing, and I could cope with the passing of one child. I'd be fine with coping with Dylan. And that's the hindsight that I took from connecting his passing, the message, and Dylan passing. So I knew I'd be fine. I knew I'd be okay.
After that happened and Dylan was born, how did it feel with the family when Dylan was born, shortly after Jordan's passing?
We were just grateful and just relieved more than anything, I was working at the time, but because of my previous pregnancy, I stopped working at 6 months. So, I was being wrapped up in cotton wool. I was, tiptoeing around, everywhere I went. So, yeah, his arrival brought a lot of joy and a lot of relief to the family, that's for sure.
What was he like as a toddler?
He was so active. He was, there was a ball at his feet from a very, very young age. I was working, and we always wanted to be parents that one of us stayed home with the kids at all times. And, with Jim being home with Dylan at that time, Jim grew up playing soccer, playing football. So it was only natural that Dylan had a ball. He probably had a ball at his feet before he could walk, sort of thing. So, I've got so many family photos of him in the shower with a football, him asleep with a football, him just everything he did. He had a football under his arm.
Was he a Perth Glory supporter coming from Perth?
Yeah, no, he was. Yeah? He was a Perth Glory supporter. You mentioned that, and it just brings to my mind this photo of both him and Taylor with their Perth Glory membership, cheering along. So yeah, no, they were very big Perth Glory fans because that was the pinnacle in Perth of soccer. If you got to that level, it was the A-League Australia thing. So that was our top club in Perth. So very much followed Perth Glory.
Was he scouted by Perth?
No, because we left Perth when Dylan was 12. Yeah, when Dylan was 12 and Taylor was 10, we moved them up to Macau. And that was part of my work, where work took me. So they adapted to moving around and seeing other parts of the world very, very well. You know, they had each other. They were very close for that reason. You know, you take them away from their friends and your environment, and they really only have each other. So a lot of times in a lot of places we went to, they shared their group of friends. You know, it wasn't Dylan, 2 years older, had his circle. They both shared their friends. So, and Macau was wonderful. It was like living in, I wouldn't say London because I'm not quite sure, but living in Australia 30 years ago, where you could just pull your door closed, you left your windows open at night. You know, there was no graffiti, there was no trouble on the streets. It was really lovely to be able to turn around and let them have the freedom as teenagers growing up to be out with their new mates without any fear of, you know, you just didn't, street crime and that sort of thing was just not a thing in Macau. Organised crime was, but it didn't touch any of the, you know, the foreigners or the Westerners that came in. So the kids had a wonderful teenage years, just, you know, having the freedom just to be kids. It was nice.
I guess as well, for their development, that probably would have helped them as well, like for their mental development, knowing that they're in a safe community, should we say, because it's really not comparable to London, because unfortunately London isn't like that anymore. No. My grandmother used to say to me, you know, back in my day, I could leave the door open and wide open, no one would walk through your front door. So I guess growing up for Dylan and Taylor, that gave them a real probably sense of safety as well, I'd imagine. Because as you know, I've got to know the family over a few years. And Taylor always says to me, every time I see him, Dylan was my best friend. Yeah. You know, he looked up to Dylan. He always says to me, he was more than my brother. He was my best friend. I really looked up to him. He really looked after me. And that really is lovely. Do you know what I mean? It really is lovely for Taylor to really talk highly of his brother.
Yeah, and I understand that because, you know, the more people I talk to that, you know, that Dylan's had contact with and not necessarily that I've had contact with, they've identified the characteristics that they've had of just somebody that was just definitely a leader, but led by example. You know, he was kind, and, you know, he would always, you know, I said in the documentary that came out about Dylan, that he was always winning awards at school. You know, if there was a new kid to school, Dylan would just like be drawn to him and go, let me show you around, let me introduce you to everybody. He really took on that role of helping people integrate with them and not be isolated. And so, so very much he took Taylor under his wing because, he was just that sort of person. He just was a very kind and caring person. I remember, you know, I have obviously 1,000 memories, but one where I sat down and watched E.T. with Dylan, and he cried all the way through it until his mum came back to get him. And it was only then that he was happy. He literally was, you know, cuddling up to me crying because his mum had left him behind. He was devastated.
Very emotionally intelligent from a young age.
Yeah, from a very young age. And so, you know, he understood that, you know, just how important like friendship and mateship was and people feeling inclusive. He really was a really kind person. Yeah.
So when you was in Macau, I think I've got this right, Dylan played in Hong Kong, is that right?
Yeah.
What was that like for your family for Dylan to play in Hong Kong? Because as you said, you're all well travelled, and to play in Hong Kong, I can imagine it's not really a big scene, football in Hong Kong, is it? Well,
not on the world stage, I would suggest no, but it's very expat lifestyle over there as well. You know, there was a lot of, I think the British colony was in Hong Kong until the 1980s or something like that. You know, there was and in Macau it was a heavily dominated Portuguese colony. So, you know, a lot of expats with children growing up. So there was a lot of like educational training schools, like small academies, like Brazilian soccer schools, Asian Pacific schools. But what used to happen was we got involved with the Macau national team because the boys were at that level, but they could never play for the team. So they used to train all the time with them, but they could never play games. But they played like five-a-side matches in Macau during the week. But on Friday night they would sail over to Hong Kong. They would train on Friday night with the Brazilian soccer schools. They'd play Saturday morning with a competition in their own age group, and then Saturday afternoon they would go and do 𝗓𝗏𝗦𝗧𝗏 coaching in another part of Hong Kong before they came back to Macau. And they'd get back to Macau, they'd play football every day after school. There'd be cage football where you just took your five players, and it was like whoever scores stays on, the other team's off, and you just rotate on all the time. But you were playing in a cage on concrete, and it really, you could see his hunger growing for the game again. And it was fun to watch. They'd never experienced playing against 50-year-old people, and so it was a really good experience for them. And as I said, he just became more hungry for the game and really just thrived.
So when did you all realise that Dylan and Taylor had something? Because they're both very, very talented boys. Yeah,
look, Dylan's had the easier of the journeys because Taylor had to work hard, with his training and his football, and he far exceeded our expectations. He did really, really well. But I think they both joined the local team in Perth at age 5. And they very quickly were getting on the score sheet. If you can imagine a soccer mad dad having, his 2 boys at home from the age of 18 months old, teaching them how to kick a ball left and right foot. They knew their way around a football from a very, very young age. So when it became competitive, they thrived. They loved the here a 5-year-old, dribbling through everybody, how they move in swarms all the time. He loved it. He really thrived from a young age. And like I said, he could kick a ball with both feet by age 2. Yeah.
So you're working in Macau. That's why you moved up to Macau.
Yeah.
And West Ham come calling.
Back in Perth, there was a scout, Mike Lee, for West Ham, and we were very good friends with them. And he used to always keep an eye on Dylan. And he said to Jim, keep an eye on him, let me know how he's doing, if he's still got the interest and everything like that. And while I was in Macau, I went home to Perth, and I caught up at one of the local football clubs with Mike, and he asked how Dylan was doing. I said, look, he's doing really well, he's thriving. He's got trials lined up in Portugal. And he said, I'm heading up to London in August. Do you think Dylan could come to West Ham before he went to these trials? And I said, yeah, sure. We can go whichever direction we want to. So we decided that we'd go to London first, and then if need be, we'd go and do the trials in Portugal. And so we come up to West Ham. We had trials at Man U 2 weeks after that, and then 2 weeks after that we had trials booked up at Blackburn. And so Dylan came for trials, and it was during the school holidays, so there was no under 14s or under 16s there. They were on a break. And so he ended up trialling with the under 18s. And Tony Carr was really, impressed that, he was holding his own against kids that were 4 years older than him and doing really well. I think he could see that Dylan had a raw talent that hadn't really been fully harnessed yet. So he said, could you stay another couple of weeks so that we can see him with his own age groups? And we were like, Man United, West Ham for another couple of weeks. If he doesn't like him, we've not only blown West Ham, we've blown Man United as well. So, we decided that we'd stay another couple of weeks, and, the rest is history, as they say. Tony said to us, he said, look, if you're coming to London, once you settle here, let us know, and, we'll get Dylan into the academy. So that's what happened. Once we moved up here, I moved up here for work, and as soon as we settled, we got them into school, and Dylan signed up in November 2008, I believe. Yeah.
I didn't know that you had trials at Man United.
Well, we never got there. We never got there.
So the stars aligned for Dylan to make it into the West Ham Academy, because as I say, we are known as the Academy of Football.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with a raw talent like Dylan's, absolutely perfect fit.
Yeah.
And Taylor was as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, because one of the things that happened when we were out in Macau, Man United came out to play games in Macau, and so we were training with the. At that time, the Man United Foundation came to train with the national team, right? So Dylan and Taylor were training with the national team, with Man United and that. So, you know, we had connections there. And so, yeah, it was like, I'm sorry, we're not coming to you because we've got an opportunity here which we don't want to miss out on.
How did they take that at Man United? How did the scouts and the coaches take the news? Were they kind of like, no, you've got to come, or? No, I don't think so at all, you know. I didn't make that call. That would have been Jim, but it was just, you know, it was just like, sorry, you know, we're going to have to pass on the opportunity. And I'm sure they get so many, you know, hundreds of kids a week that knocking on their door to say, have a look at us. So, yeah, you know, it's quite ironic because one of the photos that is at the Academy of Football with Dylan in front is Paul Pogba is in his Man United behind him. And I often think about what might have been, you know, that sliding door moment of, you know, if Dylan didn't go there where he went. But I'm so glad he was at West Ham. Yeah, I don't think we would have been as loved anywhere else as what he is. Hold up, just one moment of your time. If you're wondering where I got my hat from, it's from 𝗓𝗓𝗐𝗘𝗕𝗕𝗢𝗢, who are a young, vibrant streetwear brand. They've teamed up with West Ham to make these hats. They're an officially licensed product, and I absolutely love them. Just visit www.𝗓𝗓𝗐𝗘𝗕𝗢𝗢.com and enter AOF10 at the checkout, and that'll give you 10% off. Now back to the episode. So moving from Macau to London is obviously probably a big cultural shock as well. Fast-paced life in London. Yeah. How did you all settle when you got here, and how did the boys take it as well? Well,
they were over the moon. You know, I gave them a choice. You know, I said I can go back to Australia for work, or I can go on to London for work. You know, what would you like to do? And they were like, oh, let's go to London. You know, as you know, 14 and 12-year-old boys, the thought of being around that much football, you know, was just really exciting for them. So they took it really, really well. The hardest thing was getting used to it being dark at 3:30 in the afternoon. That just did not make sense to us. We could not.
It's not on your radar in Australia
at all. Not at all. Yeah. You know, in summer 10:30 is, you know, lights out sort of thing, and at least in winter we get to maybe 6, 7 o'clock, but not walking out of school and it being pitch black. That was just really, really weird. But they adapted really well. They loved the environment. You know, it was a whole new lot of kids. They picked up banter really easily. They had no choice, I suppose. You know, they're the Aussie kids in this, you know, in this English football environment. And to be fair, there was a lot of different nationalities there at the time as well. So no, they just, you know, what kid wouldn't love the opportunity to come up here and try and immerse themselves in the football environment.
Because I know their teammates at the time, like Elliot Lee and George Moncur, Leo Chambers, players like that, they thought the world of the boys, didn't they? Yeah. They really, really did.
Well, when they first signed Dylan, about probably, I'd say maybe 8, 9 months later, they didn't realise that Dylan had a brother at that time. And so when they found out, they were like, well, let's get Taylor in. So Taylor come down and he joined. He said, oh, you know, I'm 12, so they put him in the under-12s, and they loved him, and they said, oh, we want to sign him for, you know, we've got a game down, I think it was Southampton Way, something like that. And we went, yeah, just not sure you've got him in because Taylor's a February born, and I think the years go from, like, school years are August through to July, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's sort of September through to July, yeah.
So I said, I think you might find that Taylor has to be in the under 13 age group, and so, but no, it was just an adjustment for him. But obviously that's another year up. But yeah, like I said, Taylor, he worked really hard for his football, and he was just really unfortunate that he carried injuries all the time. They were soft tissue injuries, and you know, his hamstrings were always a chore for him to, you know, try and get over. And, you know, they both the boys managed to play for their country at under 17 and Dylan under 20, 22. So, you know, they lived some dreams that a lot of kids actually want to live. They were lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to do it. And you know, I realise that how lucky we were as parents to be in a situation to all go together. Because I think one of the hardest things to do is, you know, you hear no's, you hear times when you're not on the bench, when the times where you haven't made the squad, you know, all those things that are challenging for young players, and to have your family around you, I think is a really important part of why Dylan was so successful.
Yeah, because you are a very close family. As I said, back in 2019, when I met you for the first time in that November, you had family over from Australia as well, Ashley and Madison.
Yeah.
And meeting the family for the first time, I was like, wow, this is such a close, loving family, and you all look out for each other.
Yeah.
So I can imagine back then, as I said, moving to England, wonderful for the boys to have such a solid family unit to move to a place like this.
No, look, I think it's really important, you know, really important just in general, let alone, you know, it's a really tough road for kids at that age to actually deal with the sheer magnitude of, you know, the environment that you're thrusted into. You know, you have to give up so much as kids, and as you get older in the teenage years, you know, that's when I think it makes or breaks you. You know, you're on the radar. Girls all of a sudden are on the radar. Cars are on the radar. You know, going out. You know, you've got to be in a position to be able to give all that up and realise that it'll all be there for you at the end of your
sacrifices.
Football. A lot of sacrifices. So having people around you that can keep you on the path and keep you motivated and keep you going in that direction, I think it's really, really important. So really proud to be in a position to say, hey, we did this as a family. But I just think that they thrived. They thrived in the environment, and they were around a West Ham family
club.
Yeah. You know, as you mentioned, Elliot and George and Leo, and you know, you've got Matthias and Rob and Dan Potts. You've got so many, Blair. You've got so many boys that just beautiful kids, and they all just got on so well. You know, none of this competition, you know, and I'm not talking to you because you're here for my position. You know, they were mates off the field.
They played as a team.
They played as a team, and they were mates, you know, off the field as well, which was lovely.
When did you realise Dylan was unwell?
Well, Dylan went away to Portugal with the first team, had his 17th birthday while he was out there. And it wasn't long after he came back from there that he said, oh, Mum, I've got a lump on my testicle. And I said, all right, let's go get it checked out. Do you want to see the doctors at the club? And he went, no. I said, okay, let's make an appointment for the GP. And as you know, making an appointment is usually 2-3 weeks away anyhow. So yeah, we made an appointment, and he went to the GP, and the GP turned around and said, Tim, you've got a cyst. Don't worry about it. People live with cysts all the time. And, you know, once again, hindsight would be a wonderful, wonderful thing. That to me was just such good news. I was like, oh, great, it's just a cyst. Don't worry about it. Carry on. Everything's good with the world. You know, Dylan was progressing at a rate that, you know, was overwhelming at times for him, and he was really grounded. But yeah, it was like, in hindsight, I wish I had that instinct to get a second opinion, or even know that you needed an ultrasound for that sort of thing. But I didn't know. And so it was only when he was out at the Under-17 World Cup in Mexico, and he was pulled for a random drug test, that the Australian doctor rang him and left a voicemail, and Dylan thought that was weird. He needed to return the call, and he said to him, your drug test has come back negative. You've failed, and you've either taken a banned substance or you have a tumour. And by this stage, Dylan's testicle was quite swollen because he got kicked in the testes in the game against Brazil, which was the game beforehand, so 2 or 3 days, and his testicle was still sore. So yeah, then it was like that light bulb moment that went, this is something more than a cyst. Hearing that word tumour, he probably thought, well, my cyst has actually been kicked and it's erupted, or it's inflamed. Still no thought of cancer. And it was only when he flew home on the Thursday, which was 7th of July, 2011, he flew back in, and we got him tested at Holly House on the Friday, and it came back, yeah, you've got testicular cancer, and it's stage 3 or 4 because it's been left so long and untreated. So he had a real, job on his hands to, and I'm listening to this, and I'm really somebody that, while I'm quite a strong woman, I can't handle bad news. I can't deal with it, and my blood pressure drops. I'm laying on the floor listening to what's going on because otherwise I'll drop to the floor. I can't handle bad news. And so it was it was gut-wrenching to think you're dealing with testicular cancer and know nothing about it, nothing at all.
How did Dylan handle that news? Because Dylan, he always used to strike me as a very strong character.
Yeah.
Was it a case of, for him, as right, I'm going to get on with this, or was he obviously devastated?
No,
right?
He was like, I think having so little knowledge about it made it a little bit easier. It made it like, okay, well, we'll just get on, we'll have the treatment, and, I'll be back playing, And I think in the documentary, he makes some reference to the fact that, 12 months later, he's still got no hair, he's still having treatment, he's still got testicular cancer. And he had no understanding that process would be this long. He thought that it was just a small thing that was going to require some treatment, and in 6 months later he'd be back playing and no problem. And by all accounts, the very first lot of treatment was working really, really well. Dylan was eating wonderful, eating well, keeping fit. His first lot of treatment, his markers came down after the first round of chemotherapy. And so they all returned to normal, and they turned around and said, we want to give you the full 4 cycles because the cancer was, in stage 3 or 4. So he had them. He said normally between stages 2 and 3 they would give you a CT scan, and they said let's not bother with the scan because the markers are down. You're an athlete. Let's not add anything to that may harm you. They even adjusted at the beginning of the treatment, the BEP that you would normally have. It's 𝗜𝗡𝗦𝗧𝗔𝗚𝗏 and cisplatin. And they didn't give him the BEP, the 𝗜𝗡𝗦𝗧𝗏 part of it, because it can scar your lungs. So then it'll, as an athlete, you want your lungs to have full capacity and everything like that. So they really catered for Dylan. And I remember having a conversation with Dylan, and it wasn't long. It wasn't one where I had to sit and convince him. It was just that chat to say, do you know what? I said, I think if you looked at it from a point of view that you're going to be a cancer patient for a short time, but you're going to be a professional athlete for the rest of your life, or for as long as you can maintain that, make that your focus. This is just a blip in the road. But while you're going through your cancer treatment, focus on the fact you're a professional athlete, and, just keep on your goals. He doesn't have to stop. And he was brilliant. He took everything in his stride. And I loved the photo that was taken in January 2014 of him. He has no hair. He's at the under 22 qualifiers in Oman. He's muscly. You can see every muscle in his body. And the reason I love it is because when I showed the doctors this in Germany, they said, how long ago was this? 3 years? And I go, no, 3 weeks ago. They could not believe how physically fit Dylan was with going through, seven cycles of chemotherapy. And they were just, he just had this just resilience that this cancer isn't going to define me. And yet this is what he's being remembered for. So, it's a cruel thing, but life can be cruel sometimes, can't it?
Because he made his debut for West Ham in that time as well. When I was there, I saw Dylan make his debut. And when he was on the touchline, there was a real sense of togetherness in the stadium, because we all know what Dylan was going through. And I think there wasn't a dry eye in the house, for one. And secondly, there wasn't one bum on a seat. Everyone stood up and gave him a round of applause when he came on. I think it was just such a beautiful moment as well.
Oh, look, absolutely.
For everyone.
Yeah. I remember speaking to the doc, and Sam Allardyce had said to Doc Wheeler, he said, what I really want to play Dylan, what harm am I going to bring to him medically if he goes on? And Doc Wheeler went, no harm whatsoever. You'll probably make him the happiest person alive, because he's worked really hard to, get his opportunity. So, they were brilliant, the club. I was saying earlier on this week, there was never an appointment that I didn't go to with Dylan that there was West Ham represented. And, it's, being in the medical field and being in that field, they're asking questions that, I don't even know to ask. And they're asking questions around their football. What can he do for this, and so it was fabulous having them there. They would regularly give him DEXA scans, which scan his bone density to make sure these bones weren't brittle from the chemotherapy, and making sure that he could have contact sports and that sort of thing. So, they really went out of their way to make Dylan included. And I think they did that because they could see just how much this kid wanted it. This kid's getting out of bed. He's just had, a cycle, a 5-day cycle of chemotherapy, spent 2 or 3 days recovering, and he's in training. He's in getting as much fitness and as much rehabilitation as he can to build himself up. He's out on the pitch, and he's, they all wear their GPS trackies and that sort of thing, which was great because I also allowed them to monitor Dylan's blood at that time. So when his neutrophils and platelets were low and non-existent, they wouldn't let him do any of the contact activities. So he would go do something on his own. But every other part of training he could participate in. So they really allowed him to be included in with everything they were doing. And that, I know 100% helped him get out of bed every day.
I remember in 2014, when he was playing with the likes of George Moncur, I always remember seeing a photo of Dylan playing, I think it might have been an under-21s game. He was in the white Adidas kit. I always remembered it. I always remember that photo, and he just looked so happy. He had a head full of hair, and he just looked so happy. And I remember seeing that photo, and I remember thinking to myself, he's done it. Yeah. Because as supporters, we didn't really have too much inside knowledge on what was going on at that time. And I always remember that photo of Dylan looking so happy. And I'm sure it was with George Moncur. Yeah, I remember. He's made it. Yeah.
No, I remember the goal because I remember it was at Hornchurch. They had a game at Hornchurch, and George had this, took the corner, and Dylan just come across the front of the goal and flicked it in really like nonchalant, and then just like swaggered over and gave a hug. It looked like, this is what I do for a living, that sort of attitude, rather than the excitement of scoring a goal and being back. It was like, this is where I want to be. And it was just really so calm and that. And I remember it well. And it's a beautiful photo. And he was just, he took everything in his stride. He knew that he was. He wanted to be a footballer. He didn't want to be a cancer patient, and that was his focus. So he was on track.
The first protocol towards, I think it was at the end of his treatment, his lymph nodes were removed. Yeah. I've got that right, because my dad is also a cancer patient, and he's had his lymph nodes removed. Yeah. So I do have a little bit of knowledge. Yeah. That was to stop the spread.
So what happens when it leaves, when it goes from the testy, and because Dylan had stage 3-4 cancer, it had already started metastasizing. So when they were able to bring it down, they removed the lymph nodes. It's in the stomach, just to stop any more spread, and hoping that everything above it they've already either got or it hasn't gone above that. So I think in late 2011, early 2012, he had the 𝗓𝗡𝗕𝗕 surgery, and this massive scar, and I'm laughing because I remember having it. We were in London Hospital having it done, and he's sitting there watching a movie that's making him laugh. And he goes, "Oh, it hurts so much." I said, "Turn the movie off." He said, "No, it's my favourite movie. I want." So, he put himself through pain and discomfort. No, he was just, look, I just, Was I heartbroken? Oh, absolutely, as any mother would be. You're heartbroken because of the dreams that you have for your son, your child, family, growing up, having children, all that sort of thing. All of a sudden they vanish, and they go, and you're heartbroken for it. But he was just such a wonderful, wonderful character. He really, really was, and I often refer to the legacy that has been left behind for him, and I'm really grateful because at no time have I gone, can we do this? Can we do this? It's always been, Karen Brady going, Tracy, do you mind if we name the Academy Award player after Dylan? Do you mind, if we put Dylan in the Champions Place? Do you mind if we name the Education Centre after him? And, and I'm blown away with all of this because, 125, what are we up to now with the Academy of Football? Probably 125 years, 128 years.
128 years.
Yeah, right. Of all the people that have come and gone through the Academy, they've singled Dylan out for this wonderful accolade to represent their education side of things. And, how can you not be proud of that? How can you not be proud as a mum and just remember the wonderful things that he's being remembered for? I'm really grateful and so incredibly proud that that's how he's being remembered.
Well, the strength and resilience you've shown as a person and as a woman, because I've always said I've always felt a natural gravitational pull towards yourself and towards the Tombides family. And I've got to say, Tracy, honestly, you're absolutely wonderful. You're a wonderful woman, and the strength that you've shown in this process after Dylan's passing has been phenomenal. Because I'm going to be totally honest with you, I've been really looking forward to seeing you today, but there was a small part of me that was like, I've got to sit down with Tracy and I've got to look her in the eyes, and she's got to talk to me about her son that she's lost. And for me, that is my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
For that to happen to me, one of my children.
No, and I can understand that, and and I feel that there's a lot of people out there. When I've had people come up to me and just total strangers just hug me, and just go, "You have no idea that you've saved my son's life, because the message you're delivering now, he found a lump, and he's getting a treatment, and he's got a hard road, but his road is so much more, straight because you're raising awareness for it." So, when total strangers do that, it's wonderful. But when Dylan passed away, I was, like I said, devastated. But I also remember the conversations that I had with Dylan about being the best version of himself, and just living for what you want to live for. You don't want to be a cancer patient. You want to be a professional footballer. Go out and do that. There's no reason why you can't be, getting treatment and being the best version of you on the football pitch. So, a lot of the things that I did subsequently were to be, well, what would Dylan do? Well, Dylan would get on with and do it. He just showed it. And, I had work to go back to, and I really was so grateful of how work allowed me to be a mother during that 3 years. There wasn't a day that Dylan spent in hospital that I wasn't there, So we had this really, quite unique bond, because every hospital visit, I'm sleeping on the mattress, or I'm sleeping in the hospital bed because Dylan wants to sleep on the mattress. We spent a lot of hours together and had a bond that was really unique. And so very, very grateful that my workplace allowed me to put all of those needs aside while I looked after my family. So, even to the point when I went back there, they'd presented me with a book with all their condolences in, and I could take it away and read it. And my first day back was as normal as it could possibly be, which was wonderful. I didn't want to get back there and have everyone come up and go, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I would have been, emotional. So very, very grateful to be able to do that. But my strength comes from just being somebody that understands that my beliefs are that we all have our own paths mapped out. And this was Dylan's path and Dylan's journey. And I remember saying to him one time, after he'd passed away, I connected with him through a medium. And he said to me, "Mum, please don't go down the malpractice route. You'll be miserable for a long, long time. It'll be so drawn out. You'll be so unhappy." And he said, "Please don't do that." And he said to me, "I wasn't long for this world. And if I didn't go when I did, I would have gone soon after." And that just gave me such a sense of relief, because I had everything at my disposal. West Ham made it available to me to have the very best of everything for Dylan. And knowing that it didn't matter what I had, it wasn't going to change the outcome, it was quite a relief. It was a sense of, I don't sit there of a night time going, "Oh, I wish I'd have done that," or "I should have done that. I could have done this and he might still be here." I didn't have to think like that. There was a real sense of relief. And at that time, my attention just turned to Taylor, because he was struggling. He just lost his best friend. And one of the things that was really quite significant, Dylan's passing left Jim, Taylor and I all grieving on totally different planes. I was coping through it. I was the strength through it. Taylor was not understanding it, and Jim was not coping with it. And so my focus turned to Taylor. I thought Jim as an adult would be able to reach out and get the support that he needed when he knew that he needed it. So my focus became Taylor and giving him the tools to deal with the loss of his brother. And I would say things like, "Taylor, you have to take the positives out." And he would throw these things back at me going, "What could be the positive about Dylan dying?" And I said, "You have to look at it and go, Dylan was in hospital surrounded by his family. Do you know how many people get that opportunity?" And I rattled off a couple of examples of people that were passed at the same time and the traumatic way they passed. And I said, "Taylor, imagine being the brother or the mother of that child. How do you deal with that?" I said, "We are so lucky that Dylan was in hospital, that Dylan's pain was being as managed as best it possibly could be. And when he finally passed, he knew he was surrounded by the people that he loved." That's the positive. That's when your thoughts are dark, that's what you've got to turn to. You don't let those other thoughts come in your head. And so there was a lot of examples like that going through the...
How old was Taylor, Tracy?
Taylor was 18.
Very young.
Very young. And, I said to, he said to me one time, he said, "Oh, why did Dylan have to die then?" And the only thing I could come up with, and I apologise to all the West Ham fans out there for what I'm about to say, but I just said, well, maybe if Bobby Moore, when he was 24 and got testicular cancer, maybe if Bobby had said something then testicular cancer, there might be more awareness. But it's a disease that a lot of people shy away from communicating about because of the nature of the location of the disease, the privacy that men want. And I said, Dylan's tried to put it back on the map. And I said, this time I'm going to make sure it's talked about. And this time I'm going to make sure there's an awareness about it. And I don't want to signal anyone out for it, because that's the stigma that is associated with men's health in general. People don't talk about it. And there's quite a lot of people, I remember a conversation I had, and somebody said to me, "You will be so surprised how many people actually have testicular cancer that do not talk about it, that do not want anyone to know about it." And it's more common than we're led to believe, because people just do not want to raise awareness about it, don't want to talk about it.
Did it give you a sense of peace knowing how Dylan passed? I'm just going to touch back on that subject there, surrounded by his family, because as you said, Taylor didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And Jim was obviously devastated, as you all were, different planes.
Yeah, we all were. But yes, I got a sense of peace, because it made me realise, as a mum, all you want to do is protect your children and protect your family. And it made me realise that it didn't matter what I did. There was no way that I was going to be able to change that outcome. Dylan wasn't long for this world. And hearing him telling me that if he didn't go then, he would have gone soon after, it gave me a huge sense of relief. And I remember, I don't know whether you've seen the documentary, Taylor talks quite openly about wanting to take his own life. And,
I've not seen it yet.
Yeah.
No.
And, and I remember him going out driving and I just could not sit up worrying about him, whether he was going to get home or not. And I just said to Dylan one night, Dylan, he's your responsibility. You make sure he gets home. And if he doesn't get home, then you look after him, right? I'm not going to spend another minute worrying because I'm going to be sick. And I just brought myself a sense of peace, knowing once again that I've got no control over. I can say, don't do this, drive carefully, go slow, I can give all these instructions, but at the end of the day, I've got no control over these situations. And so, I put it in the hands of Dylan and I said, you look after him.
After the passing of Jordan, I am going to go right back to the start. Did it give you a spiritual awakening as such to prepare?
It gave me a curiosity.
Yeah, for Dylan's passing,
Yeah.
because we spoke a lot off the camera. Like we've got that in common. We're both spiritual people.
Yeah.
And you said to me that you reach out to Dylan quite a lot.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of responses from Dylan.
Yeah, no, I do. He's cheeky in spirit as he is when he was here. It gave me when Jordan passed away. It was my curiosity really, really peaked. I believed in I believed in things happening for a reason, and certainly had fate had crossed my path a couple of times already. So I had this belief, but when Jordan passed away, his passing was. I wonder what I'm learning from this, and I wonder what the message is from this. For sure, it really did raise my curiosity. Yeah,
I think traumatic experiences does shape the way how people think, particularly in my case anyway. But I really want to know a bit more about contacting Dylan, because as you said, you've got your family over at the moment, and you were speaking to Dylan, and the lights were flickering.
Yeah.
And was it your brother-in-law you were saying?
Yeah.
Was also reaching out to Dylan?
My brother, my sister and her brother-in-law. It's their grandson who's over here with them as well, and he's a beautiful young man, and he's, he often brings to my attention, Trace, Dylan's listening, or Dylan's here, because he'll see the lights flickering, and I know it's usually what we talk about, and I love things like this. Like Taylor had a tough weekend over Easter, Good Friday, and because for us, Dylan passing away on the 18th of April on Good Friday on 2014, those dates don't line up very often, Good Friday and April the 18th, and this year they did. I think the next one's in 25 years. So normally we have 2 days that we celebrate. When I say celebrate, there's certain things that we do. This year we didn't have to do it over 2 days. But Taylor was in Canada and he wasn't with his partner. She was away and he was away with football. So he was around mates. And I think he struggled a little bit more. But he sent me a message saying, Dylan's watching me. His Uber driver's license plate was ODT387.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I'm so proud of is that Taylor is recognising, I probably drummed it into him anyhow, but he's recognising these little communication links, and there's been times where he's gone, oh, Dylan was watching over me today, this happened, blah, blah, blah. And so, I know that, but yeah, that's quite a significant one. And I was somewhere in Australia back home having a brainstorming session with a group of DT38 people, and we luckily enough happened to have been on a yacht. And as we've come in and gone through the car park, there's a thing, DT38 license plate on the car park. So, you know, it's these little signs. I walk past and go, oh, Dylan just wants you to know he's really likes the conversations that we've just been having today, and this is his way of letting us know.
Yeah, I don't believe in coincidences.
No,
I really don't, because as I say, like from my own experiences, I'm very tapped into energy, you know, and you've got spirits and you've got energy. I think they're a different thing altogether, but I'm really tapped into like various energies. And as I said, seeing the letters DT and 38 on these significant days around significant conversations, that is absolutely no coincidence.
No coincidence at all.
At all.
No, and this is what I love. It makes me smile. I feel so connected with him. And, you know, I know he's overwhelmed and not embarrassed, but like, you know, wow, what a fuss everyone's making over little me sort of thing. And, you know, so I know that, you know, he's a little bit overwhelmed with all of the attention that, and the legacy pieces, you know, they've been, you know, even his, you know, shin pad message to me, you know, that in Australia just blew up, and, you know, oh, what a wonderful young man to think of his mother on a moment like this, you know, so all these wonderful, endearing things. But no, I really feel guided in my beliefs with spirituality. You know, I really feel that it's helped so much for me to cope with, dealing with his loss and dealing with it. And I recommend anybody start looking into it and doing that, because it's just, I get such a sense of peace and guidance. You know, I'm lucky. I've got a lady that helps me communicate through him. I wish I had the skill to do it, but I'd probably bug him every day and he'd be like, you know, go away, go concentrate on what you're doing down there. And I can just pick up the phone to her and she'll connect, or I can go see her in person or come and see me. And, you know, I've had some wonderful conversations, and really, like, you know, when you know, all these things that are happening right now, you know, Dylan's not been here for any of them, yet he knows everything that's going on and relates to everything. And, you know, he came on, last time I spoke to him, he asked me how I liked my new daughter-in-law. And, you know, Taylor's not even married yet, but he's with his partner, he went to school with in Macau when he was 12 years of age.
Childhood sweetheart.
Sweetheart, you
amazing.
know, kept in touch, didn't keep in touch, you know, over the years and everything like this, and then just fell in love, you know, two and a half years ago. And so Dylan's saying, how do I like my new daughter-in-law? So, you know, just beautiful things like that. You know,
I think it's wonderful that first and foremost you have found a new purpose, contacting Dylan through spirituality and the peace it has given you. Because as I said, I'm all for it. You know, I don't believe in coincidences. I used to, but I don't anymore. And I'm so happy that we're sitting here today, and, you know, you're smiling and you're telling me that you speak to Dylan often, especially where you live as well. And, you know, he communicates with you with lights flickering and stuff. I think it's absolutely incredible. And DT38 Foundation, you and Taylor are the founders of the DT38 Foundation. And that came around quite soon afterwards, didn't it?
It did come around soon afterwards. And, you know, when Dylan passed, I'll take you back, before Dylan passed. So when he came back from Oman in January 2014, the doctors here said, I'm sorry, we can no longer offer you a cure. And I thought to myself, I knew that Dylan was a really special person. You know, I could see his resilience. I could see how tolerant he was. He was so inclusive with everybody that he dealt with. And I really genuinely thought that he would go on and do something special. And because now we're looking for alternative treatments for him, I got in my head that actually he was going to show everybody that chemotherapy wasn't the be-all to end-all. You know, this poisonous drug that, you know, kills off everything in your body is not the answer. And I genuinely got that into my head. So him passing, him actually dying was such a shock for me. And that's where that whole message about malpractice, because when we were in Germany, something went wrong and we don't know what, but we know that Dylan went from first time having this treatment done, working brilliantly, to going back and having it done again 3 weeks later because it works so well, to having it and then 2 weeks he's gone, he's passed. And yeah, so it was a case of really just trying to get my head around what we wanted to do. And so we were already talking about what the messages that he was going to give. And then I was like, well, it's no longer that. And we talked about the link between maybe bringing people out from Australia to West Ham. But that was already in place. There was already, an opportunity through other contacts for that to be happening. So it was only when I took him home to Australia to have his service that I was talking to his mates and the family, and none of them knew what signs and symptoms Dylan went through. They had no idea what Dylan's symptoms were for testicular cancer. So it was then that I knew that that's what I needed to do. Wasn't so much wanted to do, it was I needed to raise awareness. As a mother bringing home a small boy, a baby boy, I should know about testicular cancer. It's linked to undescended testes. The youngest is born with it. It's a germ cell disease from the offset. So all reasons for you to be informed as a new mother about this disease, and no one was. So yeah, it made it more significant for me to actually go, I can really get my teeth into this. I can really go on a journey and make sure the world knows about the dangers of testicular cancer, or ignoring the signs and symptoms more than anything.
Yeah, because obviously since Dylan's passing, my knowledge on testicular cancer was virtually non-existent, because I don't know if you remember Craig Forrest. He was a West Ham goalkeeper. He had testicular cancer in the late 90s.
Right.
And there was absolutely no coverage or any knowledge on it whatsoever. The club were literally he's injured, he's got testicular cancer. And I remember the fan base being like, well, that's pretty serious, but DT38 Foundation coming out, as I said, when I first met you for the first time, you brought along a false...
Yeah, my medical testicles.
Yeah,
yes.
and you was like, no, Kevin, you're doing it wrong. You got to, because it obviously had the lumps in it, and you were like, no, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. And I remember us all standing around in a circle, fantastic. And
no, and it's really an icebreaker actually. It's really quite good, but it's really important. It's a really important message because there's some people that won't handle them, but I know they'll go home and think about it, and I know that if there's a lump, they find a lump, they'll remember my conversation that I've had with them. And we're very lucky to have in Australia a connection with the Socceroos, like we have a connection up here with West Ham. And I've got probably a really strong team out there because all my family's still in Perth, and we do screenings twice a year, free screenings. So we get about 100 people that can just come down and get a free screening done twice a year. And I remember sitting there I was sitting there with my team, and they were, updating me on what happened. And they said, oh, there's a dad, he's got 3 boys, and he decided to go down and find out what it was all about, just so he could explain to his kids, look, it's nothing, don't worry. The gel's cold, yes, but, it takes 2 minutes, and it's just a machine that, that waves over the top. He had testicular cancer. So this dad of 3 boys had no intentions looking for himself. He wanted to go and find out how the testing was, and they did. And so, and there's been another couple of significant moments. I mentioned that I'd finished up with my job nearly 2 years ago, but before I finished up with them, I was really at the crossroads whether I wanted to do this anymore. I loved it, but it wasn't getting me out of bed anymore. I wasn't enjoying.
No drive.
The drive wasn't there. So I decided to take a sabbatical, and I went out to another part of Australia. I went to Melbourne, and while I was out there, I got this Instagram message saying, hi, my name's Hayden. I'm from a club here in Melbourne, and I just wanted to let you know that you've saved my teammate's life because of DT38. He was able to go get checked early. Found a lump, get checked early, and we want to do a fundraiser for you if you don't mind. And I said, well, I just happen to be here in Melbourne. I'd love to come down and meet you and yes, let's do a fundraiser. So I go down there, and at this club there's one of Dylan's teammates from the Under-17 World Cup, and there's two of Taylor's teammates from the Under-17s in Iran. So I feel like I'm talking to people that know my family, and it was just a really special connection. And I think that was honing me in to make sure that, you know, I did give up the job that I was no longer enjoying, and I did move to the charity side of things and dedicate my time to, raising awareness.
Well, this is what you meant to do.
It's my purpose.
Yeah, this is your purpose. This is what you meant to do.
And it's really tough, you know. To do it. There's no financial gain doing it. It's really, month to month I'm going, having events and trying to put things on so that because we're self-funded. So it's building momentum, which is great. It really, really helps. So yeah, I know we'll get there. We'll get there one day, because I know Dylan will make sure we're doing the right things, you know. So you get rewarded when you do the right things.
Can we talk about the symptoms whilst I've got you on the pod?
Yeah, sure.
So I know that obviously the main symptom is a lump in the testicle. Does that go for the sac as well?
Yeah, so no, it doesn't. It doesn't go so in the actual testes itself, the reason they say that sometimes a lump isn't present, if you can imagine, if you've got a tumour and it hasn't broken through from to the outside, you're not going to feel that lump. So it's only when the tumour is growing on the will break through the outside, or it's growing on the outside, are you going to feel that lump. So if you start feeling a real heaviness in your testy, or one's significantly bigger than the other because they aren't the same, then it's because the tumour's actually growing inside. So there's those signs. There's the lump. The pea-sized lump is the most common sign. But if you can imagine, if it's left and it's internal and you're not worried about the weight or the discomfort, it then travels through your lymph nodes, and then all of a sudden you get an ache in your abdomen, you get a backache. So depending how long you can leave things, you can be diagnosed with having, like a brain tumour, and it's actually testicular cancer. That's where it stemmed from. So, Lance Armstrong's a classic example. He didn't act on his until 3.5 years later, and it was only because he was coughing up black tar-like blood that he went and got checked out, and he had a really slow-growing seminoma, and he was, lucky to survive. And we read his book during the treatment, because it's a book you want to read. It's from a survivor, and at that time you want to know that people survive this disease. So that's probably one of the struggles that I have when I teach people, because here I am saying it's treatable. You've got to you've got to do it, but they're like, but your son didn't die. I said, yeah, because he didn't catch it early enough, because he was misdiagnosed, and this is why I've got to put it in your hands. You've got to insist on an ultrasound. You've got to be the one that looks after you. You can't rely on other people to look after you. So yeah, I can hit home with a pretty strong message sometimes, and but I like to have a bit of fun with it, and with my medical testicles, I like to get them out and have a bit of fun.
So the fun side of it is the events that you do.
Yep.
Let's talk about the boxing. You've got one coming up in November.
Yeah.
As we all know, I participated in one in 2019 and lost, I think, about 5 stone, something like that. I'm 16 stone again now, so
we'll get you back in the ring later.
Yeah. November. So have we got a date locked in for that yet?
16th of November.
16th of November. Have we got any ex-celebrities or ex-footballers confirmed for this yet?
Not yet.
We haven't got an exclusive for the Academy of Football podcast?
I haven't got an exclusive, unfortunately. I could have, but the person that was going to hopefully jump in the ring has not been medically cleared.
Right,
so they're not, and I've said, look, please don't go against medical advice. It's one day, I said, but please help us get that celebrity into the ring. So it's something we're working on. But just recently, the awareness match that we had at London Stadium, that generated some interest, and we've got 5 new boxers that are boxing on the day. So it's fantastic, and like you said, it's a really good way to drop weight, to get a fitness, to get some discipline, and not that you need discipline, but it's I admire the world of boxing for it's discipline. I'm a bit of a wuss. I don't like watching people get hit.
It's more psychological than physical, I
Yeah.
think. Well, a lot of people in the sport will say the same thing as well. It's a lot more psychological. So what I learned when I was training for the DT38 bout is the psychological side of it. Like I literally threw everything into that to get fit for it. And obviously I was doing it for a great cause as well. And I just locked myself in the gym for a good 8 months, I think it was at the time. And after that, obviously I carried on doing it. And then COVID happened. So, but yeah, for anyone watching, get yourself down to the DT38 at York Hall.
We're at York Hall on the 16th of November, but they can reach out and get in touch with myself or the guys from Peacock White Collar Boxing. We're on Instagram, on the socials, or our website at dt38.org. And we'll put you in contact with the people that are actually going to match you up, going to help you with your fitness, going to help you with your boxing skills and that. So it's a great day out. And and as I thanked you before, thank you. You're not participating, you're still sponsoring. So you've been a big contributor to our events, and we're really grateful.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Honestly, my pleasure. Because as I said, it's a fantastic charity, and I absolutely adore your family. I really do. Every time I see your family, you're all like, Kev, So it's been wonderful. But Tracy, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Have you got a final message for anyone before we wrap up? Yeah,
look, I suppose it's really important that mums and women know about this message as well, because we're caregivers. Because the youngest has been born with testicular cancer, the oldest has been 96. My message is, you guys, you spend enough time with your hands down your pants anyhow. So while you're down there, find out what's normal. So when it's not normal, to go off and insist on an ultrasound. That's my message.
Thank you everyone for watching. Until next time, come on you irons. If you like this episode and you want to see more, give us a like, drop us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. You can check out all of our social media channels in the description below.